Hello and welcome to the daily newscast within the United Countries special by First Ukraine. You can find us at the frequencies available at our website, firsta.com. Olena Tsarenko is working for you in the studio. Each day we deliver news from the Donbas conflict in the eastern part of Ukraine, and every day shoots and shelling continue with a difference of amount and location. Anatoly Stelmak, the spokesman of the President's administration in the ATO affairs, provides facts.
After midnight, August 4th, militants continued to fire activity concentrated in the Donetsk region, and there were attack settlements Apytne, Vodine, Avdiivka, Marianka, and about 1 a.m. near the village of Leninberg, Artyomov's direction, there was a clash of our combat troops from the enemy.
On the 9th and 20th August, the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities will have a special sit-ins dedicated to consideration of the Ukrainian State Report of Convention implementation. All Ukrainian NGO coalition was one of the NGOs to submit the alternative report. The guest in our studio, Raisa Kravchenko, the head of the All Ukrainian NGO Coalition for People with Intellectual Disabilities. Thank you for joining us in the studio. First question, what was the result of the preliminary discussion?
Thank you for welcoming, and thank you for putting this question into the agenda, because UN Committee and Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is a strong instrument to effect the national policies towards people with disabilities. And in April, we had the privilege to be there, to be in the UN Committee in Geneva, and to speak about our view. We, the persons with disabilities and legal representatives of these persons, we had the opportunity to speak about the most acute issues for people with intellectual disabilities. And in Ukraine, there are about 90,000 people with intellectual disabilities. It was an opportunity to speak about deinstitutionalization, because currently in Ukraine, 32,000 people are placed into the institutions, which are psychoneurological internats or internats or boarding homes for children, and they are placed into these settings, closed settings, only because of their diagnosis, because they need external help, which our government is not willing to provide at the place they reside. It's a pity, but for the money spent by our taxpayers in the boarding homes, there could be alternative services, there could be home-based services, and people with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities could live at home. We spoke about that referring to Article 19 of the Convention, which says about inclusion into the local communities. And we stressed that there was no opportunity, and so far 5 years after the convention is ratified in Ukraine, it is still impossible in Ukraine for people with intellectual disabilities and even those with physical disabilities who need big scope of external support. It's impossible for them to stay at home.
How do the NGO prepare for the discussion in the UN community?
It was the time for reporting was 2012. And it was the time for our government to report about implementation of the convention. And at the same time, the NGOs could provide the parallel report. There were two parallel or alternative reports, and our organization was one of them, and we stressed on the lack of political will to implement Article 19, lack of political will to implement Article 12, according to which all people have these similar rights. While in Ukraine, people who are recognized legally incapable have no rights at all. They remain just bodies with no soul, no right.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Constitution. How do you think, did you contribute to the new draft Constitution?
We are very much upset about this constitution, because this time in the new draft it repeats these negative sides of the previous constitution. For example, in the draft, it is repeated 2 times that legally incapable people have no right to vote. While the convention, which we spoke about before, it is said, Article 29, that all people, regardless their disability, have the right to vote. So when the new draft has no position about the right to vote to all people, and in Ukraine more than 30,000 people are recognized legally incapable, it means that discrimination is put into this constitution, into the draft of constitution. That's one thing. Another thing is a very very impressive lines when it is spoken directly that there are alcoholics. This is the word from the draft constitution. Alcoholic, drug addict, a person with psychic illness, and there are special procedures of how they are put into the places they have to be. Meaning that the special procedures to limit their freedom, and it is especially rude that these words.
Horrible thing, yeah.
It's horrible that these words are used. And one more thing is that the agencies which provide social services, which are currently under currently are run by regional authorities or city authorities, will be a kind of downshifted to local communities. And very often these local communities demonstrate no resources to keep up, to provide agencies, to provide services. So very strong doubts about the number of services, about the number of citizens to have access to these services, etc., etc.
Are there any hopes that the new constitution will change the life of Ukrainians? How do you think?
So far, me as a director of the NGO for people with disabilities have some doubts, because I met 2 times when some provision, when some guarantee of the state is not given to all citizens. For example, in the article which speaks about social guarantees, about access to services, it is said that the representatives of fragile populations, not any citizen belonging to the fragile population, but representatives, which means that, for example, in the capital, in Kiev, there are going to be some provision of services, while in a small village, it is okay when there is no. So it's a great pity, and we have very strong doubts.
And let's talk about another very important document, National Strategy on Human Rights. How would you characterize the document?
The document meets Ukrainian obligations according to international UN conventions and other international documents, and it had to be here in Ukraine. And in October it was the president who initiated this procedure of development, the national strategy. Currently this strategy is already developed, the draft, 9 months passed. Yeah. It is the time for the draft to appear, and again it does not repeat. With gratitude, I must say that you put this issue into the agenda, but in neither of the documents mentioned here, not in the Ukrainian official or state report to the UN Committee on the implementation of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, nor in the Constitution, there's not a single time that people who need a great amount of care could be provided at home. Again, there are words about development of the network of agencies to provide social services, but nothing about our demand. But our demand was that the government has to say minimum provision. The government has to say to people with disabilities that you have the right to 1, 2, 3, to this service, this and this. And you can be provided with services, but it would be paid if you wish.
Could persons with disabilities be involved in this strategy development? How do you think?
I think that not in full range, because it was announced that the working group would be developed, established, and the Ministry of Justice established this working group, but you could not attend the sessions, and nobody knows, because we have very many, we have thousands of organizations, non-governmental organizations of disabled people, but nobody was informed when the sitting is. How could you provide your ideas? How could you provide your vision? Of course we wrote, of course we submitted our proposals to the Ministry of Justice, to the President, and to other places, but we only have this very uncertain, very vague phrase about the intention of the government to develop the network of community-based services, but nothing about very clear-cut and very exact obligation of the state, unfortunately.
Thank you for your interview. It was Raisa Kravchenko. The second day of talks in Minsk, the contact group to continue talks about the special status of Donbass, amendments to the constitution and the removal of the weapons, told the representative Martin Saydik. The meeting began at 10, according to him, in parallel subgroup meet and security 21st July. At the talks in Minsk, contact group agreed party zone of 30 kilometers and removal of artillery caliber to 100 millimeters, but then not a single document signed by the parties. Military equipment Donetsk militants guarding the paratroops from Orenburg, Russian military observers saw the OSCE. I wrote about his report, armed man on duty at one on the storage cities of heavy weapons said that the other hand soldiers from the 16th Airborne Brigade from Orenburg. These observers say in the form of terrorists had no markings. Kyiv complained to Moscow once again in the European Court. Ukrainian side are finalizing the fourth complaint to the European Court of Human Rights against the Russian Federation. The Minister of Justice, Pavel Petrenko, said. At the same time, he explained will be discussed, including human rights violation and persecutions Ukrainian on their Crimea Peninsula.
Today, we, together with human rights activities, with Rifat Chubarov, with representatives of the Majlis, discussion the practical question of how to help every person who has a relationship with Ukraine as possible to help those people who are refugees, how you can help them. The Crimean Tatars, who were, as happened in their history, once again have a situation of genocide by the Russian occupation authorities. They want Ukrainian documents. We must simplify this procedure. We do this with members of parliaments and representatives of the Crimean Tatar people.
Cancel the current order of entry to the Crimea and adopt a new coordinated with NGOs Ukrainian human rights activities demand from the Cabinet of Ministers. In Kyiv, District Administrative Court held its first meeting at which law is asked admit adopted on June 4 procedure violated human rights, namely the restricts of the freedom of movement of citizens, suppresses the right of the child and complicated the work of foreign journalists and lawyers in the temporarily occupied the peninsula.
We do not deny the right of the state public bodies to some extent restricts the freedom of movement in this situation. We are only talking about one thing. If you want to do, if you think you need it to do in the order of constitution which involve international obligation of Ukraine, all their limits must be provided by law. You cannot see limits on the part of the Cabinet of Ministers. It can't do that. We regard aggression from the Russian Federation in violation of international law as an integral part of the occupied territory of Ukraine. Ukraine remained disconnection from the citizens of Ukraine permanently resident in the area. Most of them didn't support the occupation and hope Ukraine will make every effort to restore territorial integrity.
More than 2.5 tons of illegally extracted amber arrested at night in Rivne region. According to preliminary estimates, the cost of the party about $3 million, said Interior Minister Arsen Avakov. Stone has been packed in bags. It's going to send abroad. The operation was conducted by Interior Ministry special groups together with the tax authorities, prepared her for several weeks. Confiscated amber morning brought to the capital. He can sell at auction, said a briefing Prime Yatsenyuk. The money will go to the budget.
We found it necessary to publicly show tonight seized 3 tons and 640 kilograms of amber, who was detained last night on the territory of the Rivne Oblast, a settlement of our great development. We prepared a few weeks. We have not a standard situation, and when the investigation is continuing, but on the other hand, it's obvious criminal amber mined in our country. The operation was conducted with the participation of the Ministry of Interior Special Group of State Fiscal Service and Tax Police.
Opposition bloc will not participate in the election in Kharkiv. A regional organization of political power denied registration in the region. This was announced by Chief of Territorial Administration of Justice Yuri Georgievsky says July 24, representatives of the opposition bloc filled documents. According to them, they ask eliminate regional organization of law and order, which last year was renamed the opposition bloc, and instead register a new regional organization called opposition bloc. However, the illegal procedure will take at least 2 months. That the opposition bloc will not take part in elections. The day before reminding Kharkiv office, the opposition bloc member of parliament Mikhail Dobkin reads accurate. Activists of legal sector on the social watch filled the building with stones and firecrackers. According to them, they are hiding athletic young men, which, according to activists, brought the city to shake the situation. Later, the police took away from the office 2 business unknown. Once opposition bloc was a statement of fact that this political force may, because of local elections in their cells, do not register and do not punish the preparation of the change office in Kharkiv. Maria Gaidar and Volodymyr Fedorin, now the citizens of Ukraine. President handed them passports. Ukrainian citizenship. Maria Gaidar requested the chairman of the Odessa Regional State Administration, Mikhail Saakashvili, to appoint her as her deputy. Vladimir Fedorin, Russian journalist, editor, media manager. He was born and now lives in Odessa.
I believe that Ukraine right now is the flagship of the freedoms in the area of the country where we all were born. The flagship of the freedoms, the flagship of the normalization, the flagship which gives hope to the people of the former USSR once to become members of the global family of free nations. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to heroes. Unfortunately, their voices are not heard, they are not visible. I am very hopeful that Ukraine will also see that the Russians are not only the war, not only Putin, not only aggression, not only hatred, but also something else. Your example clearly shows that it is impossible to remain silent, to live in harmony with your conscience. The maximum that you can do now for Russia is to ensure the success of Ukraine.
He has not yet turned 3 years old, but he already shows masterclass. In the Ukrainian circus at motorcycle racing championship, the youngest rider of Ukraine has showed up so far as a guest. How it was, see our next story.
Timur Kuleshov, after 4 months, will be only 3 years, but the kid already stays cool on the bike. The boy's father says there are no motorcycling schools for children, that is why he trains the young athlete all by himself. The training is roughly said. It is merely a 3-minute ride, or he can ride during 15 minutes and then refuse. We train either near the garage or at the park, almost anywhere. We always take the vehicle with us in case our boy wants to ride. Timur is the youngest rider in Ukraine. First time the kid saddled up his iron horse, he was barely 2 years old. The capacity of this bike is an ordinary scooter. Parents say that they haven't decided yet whether to send a child to motorsports, but they will definitely continue to train Timur, though then he can go to the adult category. One of the stages of the Ukrainian Motorcycle Racing Championship was held at Sunday in Kiev. There is a perspective, and it is very promising. We prepared the new orders following the European regulations. Basically, there are many chances to raise our level of such sports to the European ones. Ukrainian champion in motorcycle racing will be decided in October, when the last stage of the competition will be held. Volodymyr Karaban, Mykola Чеботарьов, Olga Tkachenko, First Ukraine.
Animated hero blocks the road at the entrance to Dublin. Irish motorists have found the middle of the road giant inflatable figure apostates from the enormous animation. It brought wind of the amusement park. 12-meter character sprawled across the road, so it was impossible to overtake. All the hurry to walk from the subscribed late. Blown away, Dublin police drivers called for help. It was the United Country newscast by First Ukraine. You can find more details at our website, firsta.com. Alan Sarenko was working for you in the studio. We wish you only good news. Take care and goodbye.